It is not enough to know. We must also apply. It is not enough to will, we must also do. Wisdom is tested when the pressure rises, when anger speaks first, pride refuses correction, and fear begins making decisions in your name. A person can collect knowledge for decades and still remain trapped by the same reactions, the same assumptions, and the same mistakes. Intelligence can explain a bad decision after it happens. Wisdom sees it coming and stops it before the damage is done. To become wise, you must learn to see reality clearly, even when the truth is uncomfortable. You must create distance from emotion long enough to judge the situation from more than one angle. Then comes the hardest part, acting with courage, justice, and restraint when the easier choice is right in front of you. That is where wisdom becomes real. This lecture will guide you through 3 proven steps: how to question your first impressions, how to make sound judgments under pressure, and how to turn what you know into virtuous action. These principles will help you think with greater clarity, respond with greater control, and make choices you can respect long after the moment has passed. You will learn how to see clearly, judge wisely, and live virtuously. Let's begin. Chapter 1. See clearly. Question your certainty. A person can carry the same belief for 20 years and never once place it under honest examination. It may have been formed during anger, inherited from family, absorbed from culture, or accepted during a season of fear, yet familiarity slowly gives it the appearance of truth. The mind becomes comfortable with what it has repeated, and comfort often feels like certainty, even when the foundation is weak. This is where wisdom begins its first and most difficult work. It turns the attention inward and asks whether the convictions guiding a life have actually earned their authority. Before a person can live wisely, they must become willing to question the thoughts they have been obeying. False certainty rarely enters the mind announcing itself as pride or ignorance. It feels reasonable, familiar, and deeply personal, which is why it can remain hidden for so long. A person sees part of an event, fills the missing space with assumption, then reacts to the completed picture as though every detail has been confirmed. The emotion arrives quickly: anger, suspicion, fear, resentment, humiliation, and the judgment begins hardening before the facts are fully known. Once the judgment becomes attached to identity, reconsidering it begins to feel painful. The person is no longer examining an idea, they are defending a version of themselves. Think about how often this happens in ordinary life. A message is shorter than expected, and the mind decides someone has become cold. A colleague pauses during a conversation, and the mind creates a story about disrespect or hidden motives. A family member makes one careless remark, and years of history rush forward to interpret the moment. A headline appears on a screen, and certainty forms before the article has even been read. The event may be small, yet the mind can build an entire world around it within seconds. Epictetus understood this movement of the mind with remarkable precision, teaching that our disturbance grows from the judgment we attach to what occurs. The event enters awareness, then interpretation begins shaping its meaning. A criticism becomes humiliation, a delay becomes rejection, a mistake becomes proof of failure, and uncertainty becomes danger. These meanings feel immediate, though they are often created before careful thought has begun. The Stoic discipline of assent exists for this exact moment, the brief space in which an impression can be examined before it is accepted. Wisdom lives inside that space. An impression can be powerful without being accurate. It may arrive with physical force, tightening the chest, sharpening the voice, accelerating the pulse and filling the mind with urgency. The body reacts, and the mind searches for an explanation that matches the feeling. This is why emotional intensity can make a weak conclusion feel undeniable. A person begins to think, "I feel this strongly, so it must be true." The wise person learns to respect the feeling while still examining the conclusion. Knowledge alone cannot complete this work. A person may read hundreds of books, memorize philosophical arguments, follow experts, understand history, and speak with great confidence, yet still make destructive judgments when pride is touched. Intelligence can gather facts and arrange them into impressive explanations. Wisdom asks whether those facts are complete, whether the explanation is honest, and whether the conclusion has been shaped by fear or desire. It also asks whether the information applies to the situation standing directly in front of the person. A brilliant mind without self-examination can become highly skilled at defending its own blindness. This is why intelligence and wisdom can travel in separate directions. Intelligence can discover new ways to win an argument, protect an image, manipulate a conversation, or justify an impulse that has already been chosen. Wisdom examines the motive beneath the reasoning. It looks at the conclusion and asks whether the mind was searching for truth or searching for permission. That question can feel uncomfortable, and it should. A person becomes wiser when they can detect the moment reason has been recruited to serve the ego. Experience also carries no automatic guarantee of wisdom. Years can deepen judgment when a person reflects, accepts correction, and studies the consequences of their choices. The same years can strengthen stubbornness when every disappointment is used to confirm an old belief. A person may say, "I know how people are," when they have simply repeated the same interpretation for decades. Age can provide a wider field of evidence, though the evidence still requires honest examination. Experience becomes wisdom only when the lesson drawn from it is accurate. Many people reach the second half of life with strong opinions and unexamined assumptions living side by side. They have seen betrayal, hardship, failure, illness, financial pressure, changing relationships, and the steady disappearance of time. These experiences can sharpen perception, though they can also produce defensive rules that become too rigid. Never trust anyone. People never change. It is too late. Nothing good lasts. Each statement may contain the shadow of something real, yet wisdom refuses to let one wound become a law, governing the whole of life. Certainty feels safe because uncertainty requires patience. The mind prefers a complete answer, even when that answer is built from fragments, because an unfinished picture creates tension. It wants to know who is guilty, who is loyal, what will happen, and what every event means. This desire becomes stronger when the stakes feel personal. The wise person learns to remain steady while the answer is still forming. They can say, "I do not know yet," without feeling diminished. Modern life makes this discipline harder. Every screen rewards speed, reaction, confidence, and immediate judgment. Outrage spreads faster than reflection because anger produces engagement, and engagement keeps attention trapped. A claim appears, thousands respond, and the pressure to choose a side arrives before the facts can settle. Algorithms study what a person already accepts, then continue presenting material that strengthens the same position. The mind begins living inside a hall of mirrors where familiar beliefs return from every direction and begin to look universal. Confirmation bias grows quietly inside this environment. A person notices evidence that supports a belief and moves past evidence that complicates it. They remember the prediction that came true and forget the 5 that failed. They collect examples that strengthen resentment, suspicion, political certainty, or personal fear. Soon the preferred story feels supported by everything they see. The Stoic must interrupt this pattern deliberately, because the world will rarely interrupt it for them. Artificial intelligence adds another layer to this challenge. It can gather information quickly, summarize complex ideas, compare arguments, and offer language for questions a person is still learning to ask. Yet the final judgment remains a human responsibility. A tool can present an answer while still leaving truth, relevance, motive, context, and moral consequence unresolved. When a person accepts every polished response without examination, speed begins replacing thought. Wisdom demands that the user remain awake. This is where intellectual humility becomes essential. Intellectual humility does not require weakness, hesitation, or the abandonment of conviction. It means understanding that every human perspective is limited, every memory is selective, and every conclusion can contain an unseen error. A person can hold a strong position while remaining willing to correct it. Marcus Aurelius expressed this posture when he wrote that he would gladly change if someone could show him that his judgment or conduct was mistaken. The strength lies in loyalty to truth rather than loyalty to pride. Research on wise reasoning supports this ancient insight. Studies repeatedly connect wisdom with intellectual humility, awareness of uncertainty, consideration of other viewpoints, and the ability to look beyond immediate self-interest. These qualities can rise or fall from one situation to another within the same person. Someone may show patience and balance while advising a friend, then become rigid and impulsive when their own reputation is threatened. Wisdom is therefore something a person must bring into the moment. Yesterday's clarity cannot make today's decision. A useful place to begin is by separating 5 layers that the mind often blends together. There is what happened, what the person believes happened, what they fear will happen, what they want the event to mean, and what they can honestly prove. These layers can overlap, yet they are rarely identical. A late reply is a fact, while the belief that someone no longer cares is an interpretation. The fear of abandonment may be real as an emotion, though it still does not establish the other person's intention. Clear perception requires the patience to keep these layers separate. The 3 questions of clear perception offer a practical way to create that patience. First ask, what are the observable facts? And remove every claim that depends on guessing another person's motives. Then ask, what part of my conclusion is interpretation? And notice where memory, fear, pride, or desire has filled the missing space. Finally ask, what information might change my judgment? And answer with complete honesty. A mind that cannot imagine any evidence that would cause reconsideration has usually stopped searching for truth. These questions can be used everywhere. They can slow an argument before words cause damage, steady a financial decision before excitement becomes recklessness, and bring clarity to a health concern before fear begins predicting the worst. They can expose assumptions in politics, family conflict, career pressure, social media claims, and private disappointment. They can also reveal how often a person has been reacting to an interpretation while believing they were reacting to reality. That realization may feel exposing because it removes many of the stories the ego has used for protection. It also opens the door to a clearer and more disciplined mind. The first sign of wisdom is the courage to admit that the first judgment may be wrong. This courage allows the Stoic to pause before accusation, reconsider before speaking, and search for what may still be missing. It creates room for correction without shame and learning without humiliation. A person who can revise a belief after receiving better evidence has gained authority over pride. The mind becomes less interested in appearing certain and more committed to seeing clearly. That commitment changes the quality of every decision that follows. Chapter 2. Judge wisely. Create distance before you decide. The mind may see clearly for a few quiet minutes, then lose all proportion the instant life becomes personal. An insult lands, a betrayal is discovered, money is threatened, a relationship changes, and the calm principles a person admired suddenly feel far away. Emotion closes the distance between the event and the self until everything seems immediate, absolute, and urgent. The mind begins speaking in commands. Answer now, defend yourself, prove them wrong, protect what is yours. This is where wisdom faces its real test, because clear thought becomes harder when the heart is under pressure. A wise person learns to create space before choosing what the moment will become. That space may last 10 seconds, 1 hour, or an entire night, depending on the weight of the decision. Its purpose is simple: to prevent emotion from becoming the only voice in the room. Anger may be loud, fear may be persuasive, desire may be seductive, and pride may sound almost noble when it begins defending itself. Each force can carry useful information, yet each can also narrow the field of vision until only one outcome seems possible. Wisdom widens the frame and asks what the emotion cannot currently see. Seneca understood this danger when he warned that anger, once admitted, can become difficult to control. Personal involvement changes judgment in ways that are often invisible from the inside. A person can give balanced advice to a friend, recognize several sides of a conflict, and recommend patience with complete sincerity. Then the same person enters a similar situation and begins speaking with certainty, urgency, and resentment. The difference is emotional distance. The friend's problem can be viewed as a whole, while the personal problem is felt from the center. Pain fills the field, and every fact begins orbiting the wound. Wisdom requires the ability to step outside that center for long enough to see the larger pattern. Research on Solomon's paradox gives this ancient insight a modern structure. Across several experiments, people often reasoned more wisely about another person's problem than their own. They became better at recognizing uncertainty, considering other viewpoints, anticipating change, and accepting that compromise may hold value. Self-distancing reduced the gap by helping people examine their own problems from a more detached position. The lesson is practical and severe. Intelligence remains present during emotional conflict, yet access to wise judgment can shrink. Distance helps restore it. Imagine describing the situation as though it belonged to someone you respect. The language changes almost immediately. "I was humiliated" may become, "The person received a painful criticism in public." "They betrayed me completely" may become, "A serious breach of trust occurred, and the full motive remains unclear." This shift does not erase the pain. It removes some of the heat from the words carrying it. The mind begins moving from reaction toward observation, and observation creates room for choice. The Stoic pause begins here. An impression arrives, the body reacts, and the mind feels pressure to act before the feeling changes. The Stoic allows the reaction to be present without granting it full authority. Epictetus repeatedly taught that impressions must be examined before assent is given, because the first appearance of an event may contain distortion. The pause is the place where the impression is questioned, the consequences are considered, and the self is brought back under direction. In that pause, freedom becomes practical. Anger is one of the clearest examples of narrowed judgment. It pulls attention toward the offense, enlarges the other person's guilt, and reduces awareness of one's own capacity for excess. The angry mind remembers every supporting detail and forgets every fact that might soften the verdict. It begins planning language designed to wound expose, dominate, or punish. A few minutes later, the words may already belong to the past, though the consequences have only begun. A wise person understands that today's release can become tomorrow's burden. Fear narrows judgment in a different way. It pushes the mind forward into imagined disaster and presents possibility as certainty. A delayed result becomes failure, a symptom becomes catastrophe, a financial setback becomes ruin, and a difficult conversation becomes the end of a relationship. The body prepares for danger while the evidence may still be incomplete. Fear deserves attention because it may reveal risk, yet it cannot be allowed to write the entire forecast. Wisdom asks what is possible, what is probable, and what is still unknown. Desire also alters perception, though its pressure can feel pleasant. It highlights reward and hides cost, making the immediate gain appear larger than the future consequence. A purchase feels necessary, praise feels deserved, attraction feels meaningful, and ambition begins demanding sacrifices that were never examined carefully. The mind starts gathering reasons to move closer to what it wants. Temperance creates distance from the pull and asks what this choice will require after the excitement fades. A wise decision survives contact with tomorrow. Resentment works through memory. It returns to the past, selects the sharpest moments, and repeats them until the story becomes emotionally complete. Each repetition strengthens the sense that the wound still requires payment. The person may forget changes in circumstance, acts of repair, or the limits of what can ever be fully known. Pain begins editing history with a steady hand, removing ambiguity, enlarging injury, and placing the self at the center of every scene. Wisdom studies the past without allowing the past to keep rewriting the present. Pride makes compromise feel dangerous because it connects flexibility with loss of status. A person may understand that a conflict has several sides and still resist any movement that could appear weak. The need to win becomes stronger than the need to solve the problem. Words grow harder, positions become rigid, and the original issue begins disappearing beneath the struggle for control. A calm mind can hold several truths at once without feeling threatened by complexity. Marcus Aurelius practiced this discipline by repeatedly returning to reason, duty, and the wider human view. The view from above offers one of the strongest Stoic methods for restoring proportion. A person imagines rising above the room, the street, the city, and the wider world, watching the conflict shrink within a larger field of human life. The insult that felt enormous becomes one exchange among countless exchanges. The delay that felt unbearable becomes a brief moment inside a much longer span. The mind sees mortality, scale, and the shared struggles of other people. Perspective lowers the temperature without denying the reality of what occurred. This broader view becomes especially important after the age of 35, when decisions often carry deeper responsibilities. Careers, marriages, aging parents, children, health, debt, grief, and years of accumulated history can all enter one difficult moment. A reaction may affect far more than the person who feels it first. One impulsive message can fracture trust. One reckless financial choice can burden a household, and one prideful refusal can keep a family conflict alive for years. Wisdom measures the weight of consequence before releasing action into the world. Experience gives the person more to consider and more to protect. Emotional distance should never become emotional avoidance. Suppressed feelings continue influencing judgment from below the surface, even when the person refuses to name them. Anger may appear as coldness, fear may appear as control, grief may appear as withdrawal, and envy may appear as criticism. A Stoic examines the emotion directly and asks what information it carries. The aim is understanding, regulation, and right action. A feeling that has been understood loses some of its power to command. Research on self-distanced reflection supports this practice in a clear way. Participants who reflected on difficult experiences from a third-person viewpoint showed stronger wise reasoning about interpersonal problems. The method helped widen attention, reduce narrow self-focus, and bring competing concerns into view. Daily diary studies have also connected wiser reasoning with lower emotional reactivity, broader interpretation, greater reappraisal, and increased forgiveness. These findings match the Stoic conviction that perspective can be trained. Wisdom becomes more available when the person changes the position from which the problem is viewed. The observer's pause turns this insight into a disciplined practice. Begin by describing the situation using your own name or the phrase, the person, and keep the language factual. Then state the problem as though you were advising someone you respect and genuinely want to protect. Identify what remains uncertain, including motives, future outcomes, missing information, and the emotional state of everyone involved. Consider the likely effects after 1 day, 1 month, and 1 year. Delay action while the language of the mind is still filled with punishment, panic, humiliation, or desperation. The dichotomy of control gives the pause direction. Some parts of the situation belong to your judgment, your speech, your effort, your boundaries, and your conduct. Other parts belong to another person's choices, the past, public opinion, chance, timing, and events already in motion. Confusion between these categories creates wasted force. The Stoic returns attention to the area where agency still exists and asks what kind of response remains worthy. Control becomes clearer when the mind stops demanding power over what was never its possession. Premeditatio malorum can deepen this clarity by considering difficulty before it arrives. A person imagines criticism, delay, rejection, loss, temptation, misunderstanding, and the failure of a preferred plan. This rehearsal reduces surprise and gives reason a place to stand before emotion reaches full force. The practice also reveals which values must remain intact under pressure. Courage, justice, temperance, and self-command become decisions made in advance. When the difficult moment arrives, the mind recognizes the terrain. A wise person does not trust every conclusion formed in the heat of emotion. They ask how the situation would look if it belonged to someone they loved, how it may appear 6 months from now, which parts remain under their direction, and what response protects character as well as interest. These questions slow the rush toward certainty and open the door to several possible readings. The person begins to see that silence may carry more strength than an immediate reply, and delay may protect more than pride wants to admit. Judgment grows steadier when urgency loses control of the clock. The mind can then act from a wider field of truth, consequence, and responsibility. Chapter 3. Live virtuously. Turn clear judgment into worthy action. A person may see a situation clearly, understand the forces moving beneath it, and still choose the action that protects comfort, pride, or immediate advantage. This is where wisdom either enters the life or remains an idea admired from a distance. Thought can reveal the right path, yet the feet must still walk it when the cost becomes real. The truth may demand an apology, a refusal, a sacrifice, a difficult conversation, or the abandonment of something that once felt essential. Virtue gives clear judgment a direction and places responsibility directly into the hands of the person who now understands. Wisdom reaches its full weight through conduct. Many people already know what they should do. They know the habit that is weakening them, the resentment that is poisoning their peace, the promise they keep avoiding, and the truth they continue hiding from themselves. They can explain the problem with perfect clarity and describe the solution in language that sounds mature and convincing. Then the hour arrives, and comfort speaks louder than principle. A wise life begins when understanding becomes stronger than excuse. Marcus Aurelius captured this demand with direct force when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." That instruction removes the shelter of endless analysis. A person can spend years reading about courage while continuing to avoid the conversation that courage requires. They can study temperance while remaining ruled by appetite, speak about justice while treating other people as tools, and praise wisdom while refusing correction. Philosophy becomes meaningful when it enters speech, spending, work, relationships, habits, and private decisions. The Stoic is measured during ordinary pressure, when no audience is present and no praise is expected. Character grows in the space between what a person knows and what they repeatedly choose. Cleverness can create the appearance of wisdom because it speaks quickly, anticipates objections, and finds reasons for almost any action. A clever mind can defend selfishness, excuse dishonesty, and reshape events until personal advantage appears reasonable. It can call fear caution, pride dignity, greed ambition, and avoidance peace. The language may sound polished, while the motive beneath it remains untouched. Virtue prevents reason from becoming a servant of impulse. A wise person examines the purpose behind the argument and asks what kind of character the conclusion is protecting. This moral direction matters because intelligence has no fixed loyalty. It can build, heal, teach, and protect, and it can also manipulate, exploit, deceive, and dominate. History contains brilliant minds that produced suffering through disciplined reasoning placed in the service of corrupt aims. A person can understand another's weakness and use that knowledge to control them. They can read emotions accurately and choose the exact words that cause the deepest wound. Wisdom requires intelligence to answer to justice, courage, temperance, and the common good. Research into wise reasoning has found that a sincere pursuit of virtue can help people reason more wisely about personal conflict. This matters because personal interest often narrows the mind precisely when sound judgment is most needed. A person who cares deeply about fairness, restraint, honesty, and human dignity has a stronger direction when anger or fear begins offering easier choices. Virtue becomes an internal standard that survives shifts in mood. It reminds the person that winning a conflict and handling it wisely may lead toward very different actions. The quality of the aim shapes the quality of the reasoning used to reach it. Wisdom, the first of the four Stoic virtues, determines what deserves attention and what kind of response fits the circumstances. It studies context, motive, consequence, timing, and the limits of what can be known. The same words may be appropriate in one moment and destructive in another, which is why practical wisdom cannot be reduced to rigid rules. Silence can protect peace, and silence can also protect cowardice. Confrontation can defend justice, and confrontation can also feed pride. The wise person looks closely at the whole situation and chooses the action that best serves reason and character. Courage carries that judgment into difficulty. A person may know what is right and still feel the body resist. The voice tightens, the mind searches for delay, and fear begins creating respectable excuses. Courage allows the Stoic to move while discomfort remains present. It may require admitting fault after years of defensiveness, ending a destructive partnership, refusing a dishonest order, or standing beside someone who has been treated unfairly. The action may cost approval, money, status, security, or the comfort of remaining hidden. Wisdom without courage remains trapped inside the mind. Justice expands attention beyond personal gain. It asks how an action affects the dignity, rights, safety, and future of other people. A decision may increase personal advantage while placing an unfair burden on a family member, colleague, employee, stranger, or future generation. The Stoic considers the wider human field and remembers that every person is part of a shared world. Marcus Aurelius returned often to the idea that human beings were made to work together and that conduct should reflect this connection. Wise judgment becomes deeper when the person stops treating the self as the only life that matters. Temperance keeps the other virtues from being drowned by excess. Appetite demands more food, more praise, more stimulation, more possession, more control, and more proof that the person matters. Anger demands stronger language, ambition demands another sacrifice, and desire demands immediate satisfaction. Temperance places a boundary around these forces and returns them to proportion. The Stoic can enjoy what life offers while remaining capable of refusal. Freedom becomes visible when an urge can be felt without being obeyed. These four virtues work together inside a single decision. Wisdom identifies the fitting action, courage accepts its cost, justice considers everyone affected, and temperance restrains the impulses that could pull the decision away from reason. Remove one virtue and the action can become distorted. Courage without wisdom may become recklessness. Justice without courage may remain a private opinion, and temperance without justice may become self-control used only for personal gain. The virtues steady one another and create a fuller form of judgment. This is how philosophy becomes conduct rather than decoration. The wise response may take many forms because life does not present every problem in the same shape. Some situations require patience, while others require immediate intervention. Forgiveness may release a burden, and refusal may protect a boundary that has been violated repeatedly. Withdrawal may preserve dignity, and confrontation may defend someone who cannot defend themselves. The circumstances determine the form of the action, while virtue determines the principle guiding it. A Stoic remains flexible in method and firm in character. For the person beyond 35, this teaching often lands with a different weight. The consequences of character have had time to gather, and the patterns of years are easier to see. Anger may have damaged trust, avoidance may have delayed a necessary change, and uncontrolled desire may have consumed money, health, or time that cannot be recovered. Pride may have kept an apology unspoken until the relationship grew distant. These realizations can be painful, and they can also become the beginning of serious correction. Experience supplies the evidence, while action decides whether the lesson will be used. Regret becomes useful when it is converted into responsibility. Replaying the past without correction can keep the mind trapped in shame, resentment, and helplessness. The Stoic studies what happened, accepts the part that belongs to personal choice, and searches for the actions still available now. Some damage can be repaired directly, some can only be acknowledged, and some must be carried with greater humility. The past cannot be rewritten, though the character shaped by its lessons remains within reach. Wisdom asks what the person will do with the years that remain. Sometimes the required action is an apology that has been delayed for far too long. The mind may prepare explanations, list the other person's failures, and search for language that reduces personal responsibility. A sincere apology requires clarity about the harm and courage to face the response without controlling it. The other person may accept it, reject it, question it, or remain silent. Their reaction belongs to them. The honesty of the act belongs to the person who finally chose to speak. Sometimes wisdom appears as a boundary. A Stoic can understand another person's pain while refusing repeated disrespect, manipulation, dishonesty, or abuse. Compassion does not require unlimited access to one's time, attention, money, or emotional life. A clear boundary identifies what conduct will no longer be accepted and what action will follow if it continues. The language can remain calm, direct, and free from revenge. Virtue protects dignity without turning protection into cruelty. Research following people through expected interpersonal conflicts found that wiser reasoning before the conflict was linked with more positive feelings and greater closeness afterward. This does not mean every disagreement ends in harmony or every relationship should be preserved. It suggests that humility, perspective, uncertainty, and attention to the wider relationship can influence what remains after the difficult moment has passed. Wise deliberation can also support cooperation when people have time to reflect on shared interests and long-term consequences. A person who sees beyond immediate victory becomes more capable of protecting trust. The decision then serves the future rather than the emotion of 1 hour. The evening trial of conduct gives these ideas a daily form. At the end of the day, the Stoic returns to the decisions that shaped the hours and examines them without performance. Where did I see clearly, and where did emotion distort the meaning of what occurred? Which action reflected wisdom, courage, justice, or temperance? And where did I act beneath what I already knew? What damage requires repair, and what specific correction belongs to tomorrow? Seneca described examining the whole day after the mind had settled, reviewing words and deeds with honesty. This practice turns experience into instruction while the details are still alive. The examination should remain exact. "I need to be better" is too vague to guide conduct, and "I made mistakes" leaves the real pattern hidden. The Stoic names the moment, the impulse, the choice, and the consequence. I interrupted because pride wanted control. I avoided the conversation because I feared disapproval. I spent beyond reason because desire demanded relief. Clear language makes correction possible and gives tomorrow a definite standard. Wisdom is available before the message is sent, before the rumor is repeated, before the promise is broken, and before the purchase turns impulse into obligation. It is present in the breath taken before answering criticism, and in the silence held when speech would only serve the ego. It appears when a person chooses duty while comfort is close, accepts a reality that cannot be reversed, or refuses to let one painful event define the rest of life. Clear perception reveals what is happening, deliberate judgment creates room to choose, and virtue gives the choice a worthy direction. Repeated conduct slowly joins these powers into one stable way of living. The person then meets each ordinary day with a clearer standard for what deserves to be done,